July 3rd, 1944. A Sherman tank from the 747th Tank Battalion pushed forward into a Norman hedgerow. The driver gunned the engine. The tank climbed the earthen wall like it was supposed to, and the moment the belly cleared the top of the hedgerow, a German anti-tank gun punched through the exposed underside. A white-hot crack, then silence. 4 Americans died in 3 seconds. The tank they had relied on was now smoldering wreckage, blocking the only path forward. The climbing tank couldn't even fight back. Its main gun pointed uselessly at the sky while German gunners took their time aiming. This scene repeated itself across Normandy dozens of times a day. American tanks were being destroyed in terrain the Army had never trained for. The invasion had been on the ground for almost a month. Allied forces had advanced less than 15 miles in some sectors. The Bocage was winning. Everyone knew about the Atlantic Wall. The beaches, the bunkers, the obstacles Rommel had built to stop the invasion at the waterline. But inland, the Wehrmacht had a defensive advantage that didn't require construction. It had been growing for 1,000 years. The Norman Bocage was a network of ancient hedgerows dividing the countryside into thousands of tiny fields. Each hedgerow was an earthen wall 4 to 6 feet high, topped with dense vegetation that had been growing since medieval times. The roots were so thick that artillery couldn't blast through them. The walls were so solid that tanks couldn't push through them. Every field was a fortress. Every hedgerow was a defensive line. German commanders like von Schultz quickly realized the terrain did their defensive work for them. And there were thousands of hedgerows between the beaches and the breakout terrain beyond. American tank doctrine said to go over obstacles, not around them. Shermans were designed to climb. In the Bocage, that doctrine was a death sentence. When a Sherman climbed a hedgerow, it tilted backward at a steep angle. For 5 to 10 seconds, the tank's belly, where the armor was thinnest, pointed directly at the enemy. Its main gun aimed at the sky, unable to return fire. German 75mm anti-tank guns, 88mm guns, and Stug assault guns waited in concealed positions. Panzerfaust teams hid in the undergrowth for close-range kills. The belly armor on a Sherman was barely an inch thick at best, half an inch in places. 1 shot, 1 kill. The Germans had turned American tank doctrine into a shooting gallery. Without tank support, American infantry had to clear hedgerows the hard way, 1 field at a time, 1 hedgerow at a time. German machine gun teams set up interlocking fields of fire. Mortars were pre-registered on every gap and gate. An American platoon would fight for hours to take a single field. Then they'd look at the next hedgerow and start again. Every field looked identical to the one where their friends had just died. For the infantry, the horizon didn't exist. Their entire world was 200 yards of mud and the next wall of roots. Casualty rates in some infantry divisions exceeded 50% in June 1944. Replacement soldiers were arriving and dying on the same day. First Army was suffering unsustainable losses in the Bocage. General Omar Bradley, the First Army commander, needed a solution, and his generals didn't have one. Bradley's staff proposed solutions: more artillery, specialized engineer units, flamethrower tanks from the British. None of it worked at scale. The Bocage swallowed resources and men without yielding ground. His engineers experimented with explosives and bulldozer attachments. Nothing worked fast enough. The answer wouldn't come from the generals. Sergeant Curtis G. Culin Jr. served with the 102nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron. He wasn't an engineer. He wasn't a tank specialist. He was a soldier watching his friends die in the hedgerows. He wasn't looking to be an inventor. He was looking for a way to save his men. What if tanks didn't go over the hedgerows? What if they went through them? Culin proposed welding steel teeth to the front of Sherman tanks. The teeth would dig into the hedgerow base and let the tank push straight through instead of climbing. His commanding officer listened. Unlike most suggestions from enlisted men, this one got passed up the chain. But there was a problem. Where would they get enough steel to outfit hundreds of tanks? The beaches of Normandy were littered with German steel. Rommel had ordered thousands of obstacles installed to rip open landing craft. Check hedgehogs. Heavy I-beam and L-shaped steel welded into crossed barriers. Tons of high-quality metal sitting on the sand waiting for disposal. Someone made the connection. The steel Rommel used to stop the invasion could be used to break the hedgerow stalemate. It was poetic. It was practical. And it was about to change the entire campaign. American units set up assembly lines on the beaches. Welders with oxyacetylene torches cut up the hedgehogs and reshaped them into tank attachments. The design was simple. 4 or 5 steel prongs, each about 3 feet long, welded to a steel plate bolted to the tank's front hull. The prongs angled downward like tusks. When the tank hit a hedgerow, the teeth dug into the earth instead of letting the tank climb. The tank's weight and engine power did the rest. 33 tons of Sherman pushing forward could rip through root systems that had been growing for centuries. Soldiers called them Rhino tanks. The tusks made them look like charging rhinoceroses. Within days, the modification was being replicated across First Army, but Bradley made a decision that would multiply its impact. Bradley wanted operational surprise. If the Germans learned that American tanks could now punch through hedgerows, they would adapt their defensive tactics. He needed them to keep defending the way they had been. He needed them confident that the Bocage would hold. Eisenhower visited the 102nd Cavalry to see a demonstration of Cullin's device before Cobra launched. He was enthusiastic. This could change everything. But they kept it quiet. No reports mentioning the devices went beyond necessary channels. The Germans couldn't know what was coming. So while American workshops welded rhino tusks onto hundreds of Shermans, the tanks stayed hidden. The infantry kept fighting in the hedgerows. Bradley was waiting for Operation Cobra. Operation Cobra was Bradley's breakout plan. Massive aerial bombardment would blast a hole in German lines near St. Lo. Then armored columns would pour through the gap and finally escape the Bocage into open tank country. The bombing was scheduled for July 24th. Bad weather delayed it. On July 25th, over 1,500 B-17s and B-24s dropped their loads on German positions. Some bombs fell short and killed Americans, including Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, the highest-ranking American officer killed in the European theater. McNair had come to the front specifically to observe the effectiveness of the breakout. It was chaos within chaos, but the attack would proceed. And this time, the tanks going through the hedgerows would have teeth. July 26, 1944. The Rhino tanks went into action. German defenders had survived the bombing and set up in their usual positions, machine guns covering the gaps, anti-tank teams waiting. The Shermans didn't climb. They didn't go around. They hit the hedgerows head-on at full speed. An earth-shaking thud. Steel teeth ripped through root and earth. Infantry who had spent weeks crawling through the green labyrinth watched in disbelief as the impenetrable walls crumbled. Tanks burst through into fields that should have been impossible to reach. German units that had held their ground were suddenly outflanked, surrounded, cut off. The static front became a rout. By July 28th, 2 days later, American forces had advanced further than in the entire previous month. The breakout was happening. August 1st, 1944. George Patton's Third Army became operational. The Rhino tanks had cracked the Bocage. Patton's armor poured through the gap into open country, exactly the terrain American tanks were designed for. For the first time in weeks, soldiers could see actual horizons, wind on their faces instead of walls on every side. They had gone from being prey in the hedgerows to liberators on the open road. In the next month, Third Army would advance over 400 miles. Patton's tanks would liberate most of France in one of the most spectacular advances in military history. None of it would have been possible if the Bocage hadn't broken first. Sergeant Curtis Culin received the Legion of Merit for his invention. He wasn't the only soldier who contributed. Captain James Depew had developed a plow device earlier. The 747th Tank Battalion had experimented with other attachments. Cullen's tusk design won because it was simpler. Any welding crew could manufacture it from beach scrap. His idea went from concept to mass production in just 2 weeks. That speed was possible because American military culture was different. Soldiers were expected to solve problems at their level, not wait for orders from above. A sergeant proposed a solution. His chain of command listened instead of dismissing him for being enlisted. German generals after the war noted this difference. They said American forces adapted faster than any army they had faced. In the peak weeks of Bocage fighting, some divisions lost significant portions of their armored strength in single engagements. Infantry casualties exceeded 1,000 men daily in the worst periods. After Operation Cobra, the nature of combat changed entirely. Rhino tanks enabled mobility, but the real factor was escaping into open country, where Shermans could finally outmaneuver German armor. German forces in Normandy lost over 50,000 men killed or captured in August 1944 alone. The Falaise Pocket trapped most of German 7th Army. Allied aircraft turned the retreat into a devastating rout. A month-long defensive stalemate had been broken by welded scrap metal and American ingenuity. The Bocage held for 6 weeks, then it broke in 6 days.